Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast from Agriland that keeps you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Charles O'Donnell and I'm joined again by Aisling O'Brien. This week has been another challenging one when it comes to weather, with several areas seeing heavy rain in recent days, particularly counties Kerry and Cork, which saw met air and weather warnings for rain this week. In light of those weather challenges and some other issues as well, a number of flexibilities are on the cards for farmers. Most urgently, I suppose, Aisling, the National Liming Programme. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
That's for sure. Well, I suppose firstly I might say, Charles, we're lucky down here in the southwest we didn't get washed away because it felt like biblical rain there for the last 2 days. But thankfully there seems to be a bit of a reprieve at the moment. But as you rightly said, we had quite a few announcements this week in relation to scheme flexibilities, both here at home and in Europe. So let's kick off first with the National Liming Programme. Now, of course, that scheme was introduced last year to incentivise the use of lime, which, as we know, is a great way to correct soil pH, improve soil health, and generally help increase the uptake of nutrients by plants in the soil as well. So over 14,500 claims were submitted under the programme, with advance payments issued to farmers in the final months of last year. Now, the payments were conditional on the purchase of lime no later than the 7th of November last, and subsequent spreading then before the end of this month. However, given the poor weather conditions out there, particularly in recent weeks, but also in recent months, there were repeated calls from farm organisations for this deadline, which had actually already been extended by the minister, to be pushed back further. So on Wednesday, Minister for Agriculture Charlie McConalogue announced that the final date for spreading lime now under the scheme has been extended until Friday, the 28th of June. So somewhat of a U-turn there, Charles, after the minister had repeatedly ruled out allowing more time to spread lime previously, because he said there had been a generous extension already granted to the end of March. But he did say that he recognised now the challenges that farmers were facing trying to spread lime due to the high levels of rainfall, which has led to trafficability out there being next to near impossible. You destroy a field if you were going into some of them at the moment. They're bottomless in some places. So the extended deadline is going to give farmers in this scheme the breathing space to hopefully get out there and spread the lime when hopefully conditions improve. So it is somewhat of a needed flexibility out there, because I'd imagine a lot of farmers didn't get anywhere near the land to spread lime over the last few weeks.
Yeah, and Aisling, you mentioned there as well, and a lot of people, not just yourself, have used the term Uturn, and the minister has ruled this out on more than one occasion. And obviously, many farmers would be happy to see that Uturn, but it was kind of, I suppose, would you agree, a kind of inevitable extension given the weather we've seen?
Yeah, it had to come, Charles, really, to be honest, because I mean, as I said, you potentially could destroy your field, you could poach it, you could, do big damage to it just to comply with the scheme conditions and not to get penalties or see, payments being clawed back or anything like that. And nobody wants to see it come to that. And I suppose the uptake of the lime scheme, there has been great enthusiasm for it, and it is a very worthwhile scheme because of the benefits it has to soil out there. So, I mean, making it a little bit easier for farmers to comply with it and to get the benefit of it, I suppose, is it makes sense, really.
It's one of those rare things where it's an environmental scheme that everybody is completely on board with and wants to see it kind of be successful. But elsewhere, Aisling, we've also seen changes to the 3-crop rule under the conditionality for the Common Agricultural Policy.
Yeah, turning our attention to the tillage side of the house now. I suppose on Wednesday, we got the announcement that there was an exemption to the crop diversification element, or the 2 or 3 crop rule, as it would be more commonly known amongst farmers, under GAIAC 7, which of course is the good agricultural and environmental condition. Now, there are a number of GAIACs, there are 9 GAIACs under CAP, and they refer to a range of standards concerning maybe soil, climate change mitigation, habitats, water quality, and they form part of the conditionality rules under the new CAP. So GAIAC 7, which we're concerned with here, involves crop rotation in arable land in order to preserve soil organic matter content. And it has 2 aspects: crop rotation and crop diversification. So this week's announcement means that farmers will be exempted from the crop diversification rule for this year, But farmers should bear in mind that they will still be required to meet the obligations in relation to crop rotation by 2026. So Minister Charlie McConalogue said the derogation would give farmers the flexibility to grow one, two, or multiple crops to suit their individual circumstances. And it'll allow farmers to pick the crops that best suit their farms, taking into account the time of sowing, market returns, and seed availability, because seed and the sourcing of seed has been an issue this year. And the minister said that the adverse weather and the seed shortage has restricted the crop options for tillage farmers this spring. And he noted as well, Charles, that Met Éireann data shows that most weather stations experienced more than 150% of the average rainfall in the July to December 2023 period. That just shows how much rain has fallen in the last few months. And the minister said he was satisfied that these weather events allow for the use of force majeure within the regulations. Now, this has been welcomed, of course, Charles. This had been campaigned for by farm organisations, including the IFA. And the association's National Grain Committee Chair, Kieran McAvoy, said that the announcement represented an important flexibility. He said that the autumn of 2023 was very difficult nationally, and Teagasc Analysis estimates that 35,000 hectares fewer winter arable crops were sown for harvest 2024. And he said that tillage farmers have been through a torrid time. I'm sure that tillage farmers out there could think of a lot more words to describe what they've been facing over the last year out there, Charles. But this is another important flexibility that's been announced this week. And I'm sure a lot of farmers out there will breathe a sigh of relief that they will be still in compliance with the CAP conditions and this flexibility under GAIAC 7, long overdue and long campaigned for, and thankfully coming through this week.
Absolutely, Aisling. But flexibility on this particular GAIAC may only be the start of leeway under the Common Agricultural Policy. The European Commission is continuing to make moves on its plans to reduce administrative burden for farmers, which we've covered on the podcast before. But there seems to have been a significant development this week, Aisling.
Yeah, that's true, Charles. As you said, we have been reporting about the Commission's response to the ongoing farmer protests across Europe, along with difficult weather conditions in some countries. We've seen floods and droughts and making farmers' lives very, very difficult. So Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, as you said, has been announcing a series of short and medium-term proposals to ease what she said is the administrative burden on farmers, or what farm orgs might call EU red tape and bureaucracy, essentially. So this week we learned that a document has been prepared for the Council of the EU and the European Parliament, which, if adopted, would actually exempt small farmers who would have no more than 10 hectares of agricultural land from conditionality controls and penalties under CAP. And it's understood that if this proposed revision to the regulations is adopted, it would be for member states then to decide if they want to implement those exemptions to CAP conditionality and essentially have a look at that through their CAP strategic plans on the ground. So as such, small farmers represent 65% of CAP beneficiaries, but actually account for only around 10% of the total agricultural area in the EU. And this leaked document, and we must stress it's a leaked document and that it could be subject to change, says that this would actually simplify the work for many farmers out there while not reducing the overall environmental and climate ambition of the Common Agricultural Policy. And these farmers would also be exempted from the application of administrative penalties for non-compliance with conditionality requirements. And the proposed changes would also provide for greater flexibility on some of the aforementioned GAIACs. Now, the leaked document says that the proposals have been tabled with political urgency, and they aim to respond to what it has described as a crisis situation in EU agriculture. So very stark language being used in this leaked document. And it is important to note as well that last week the Commission did launch an online survey to gather the views of farmers across the EU about how bureaucracy, red tape, and the administrative burden, as they call it in Brussels, impacts farmers inside their farm gate. And it's remaining open until the 8th of April, and it seeks to understand the workload placed on farmers as a result of CAP and what might be termed in some cases inflexibilities under CAP when it comes to adverse weather events or different things like that, and how, it is difficult sometimes to stay within the rails when it comes to schemes out there. So you can find details on Agriland if you search EU and survey and red tape. You'll get the details there of how to click into that survey. And I understand as well that following the results of the survey, the EU is actually going to reach out to around 300 farmers individually as well to speak to them in more detail too. So if it's something that you're annoyed about out there, make sure and get your voice heard before April 8th.
Yeah, Aisling, as you mentioned there, it is stark language from the Commission. We're used to the Commission putting things in more measured terms, I suppose. So I suppose...
Yeah, I give you administrative burden.
Yeah, but it does seem that there's kind of a realisation there on the part of the European executive and European leadership that this is there's issues there that aren't going away, I suppose.
I think there's also a recognition as well that June is just around the corner, and there's a little thing called the ballot box playing on their minds.
Yes,
as well.
Of course, that can't be forgotten either, of course. But moving on, Aisling, to an issue that is, I suppose, less to do with the weather, but it has nonetheless caused concern with many farmers in Ireland. That's the changes to the beef breeding indices by the ICBF that came into effect back in November. Minister McConalogue has already made some changes to the Circular Carbon Efficiency Programme as a result of the changes to those indices, but now more changes this week, Aisling.
Yeah, that's true. So a second round of SCEP changes announced by Charlie McConalogue since those controversial amendments were made to the beef breeding indices by ICBF in November. Now, those changes, ICBF said, to the replacement and terminal indices, which had not been reviewed since 2015, came following an independent review as well as consultation with working groups and technical advisory panels. But that move, as you rightly said, has caused huge upset amongst farm organisations and breed societies out there. And a meeting of stakeholders concerned with the changes to the indices was meant to go ahead at the start of this month, but it was actually postponed. And the ICBF at that stage said that they were made aware that there was discussions that were at a sensitive stage and that they had been requested to postpone the meeting. Now, it was never confirmed officially what those sensitive discussions were, but we understand that they would have related to concerns about the eligibility of some pedigree bulls for SCEP that would have been impacted by these changes to the indices that had been announced by ICBF. So the latest changes to SCEP announced by Minister McConalogue this week aim to specifically address that issue. So under the flexibility, bulls that are genotyped as 4 or 5 star on the September 2023 ICBF evaluation, which no longer have that status following the changes made in November, will now be considered eligible in the context of Action 1 in SCEP, which is the eligible bull action. Now, that action requires at least 80% of the calves being sired by a 4 or 5 star bull in years 1 or 2 of the programme, increasing to 85% in years 3 and 4, and then ultimately 90% by the end of the programme. And we also got confirmation from the minister this week that females genotyped as 4 or 5 star on the September 2023 ICBF evaluation, and which subsequently also fell in the revised changes, will be considered SCEP eligible under Action 2, which is the female replacement strategy. So the minister said that those flexibilities would allow farmers to buy SCEP eligible animals from a non-SCEP herd, and it would help them in meeting Actions 1 or 2 of the scheme. And Charlie McConalogue said he understood that the recent changes approved by ICBF in November, he said that they had caused huge concern amongst farmers, and he had listened carefully to the feedback from stakeholders, and he was satisfied that the flexibility that he announced this week would address those concerns about compliance with SCEP without undermining the overall objectives of the scheme at the same time. Now, the IFA President Francie Gorman said that the announcement would address the concerns of suckler farmers and pedigree breeders about SCEP eligibility in a pragmatic way. And he said it would now clear the way for the ICBF stakeholder forum to meet again and to focus on the agreed actions that they had set out after their first meeting. And the IFA Livestock Chair Declan Hanrahan said that the agreement had been reached on the inclusion of a minimum weight for cows in the index, and the forum would also review the carbon piece and commencement of work by Teagasc on assessing the key factors and costings on weanling producing farms, with the objective of developing developing a weanling index which would reflect this production system. And he also said that phasing out of the star ratings is also under consideration by the forum. So lots more to come on that. But I'm sure a lot of farmers out there who were concerned, particularly about pedigree bulls, breathing a sigh of relief this week.
Yeah, absolutely, Aisling. And I suppose time will tell if the changes introduced this week will kind of alleviate some of the concerns that have been expressed for the last, I suppose, 4 months now at this stage. But moving on now to something completely different, Aisling. And you mentioned a few moments ago the European and local elections that are coming up in June. And one of the would-be candidates is someone who's familiar to readers of Agriland. Eddie Punch from the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association is putting his hat in the ring.
Yeah, after 25 years in the ICSA, the General Secretary has confirmed this week he is set to leave the association in order to run for Europe. And he confirmed to us that he's going to run as an independent candidate in the Ireland South constituency. And Eddie Punch lives in Cratloe in Clare, where he runs a suckler and beef farm with his wife and 4 children. And he told us that he's been going out to Brussels for over 2 decades, Charles, and he believes he knows how it works. And he said he's frustrated that farmers aren't being better represented on the EU stage. And he said never before has the farming community needed strong, committed and knowledgeable representation. And he pointed to his lobbying record. He said he's actually negotiated with every EU farm commissioner since Franz Fischler back in 2003. And he wants to put that experience now to good use for the farmers in Ireland South and no doubt across the country as well. But he is keen to be branded not as just a one-trick pony as well, Charles, and not to be boxed in as just a farming candidate. He also pointed to the need for balanced regional development. And he said instead of just Dublin Airport kicking on and expanding, he said that he wants to see regional airports also getting their fair share and getting a chance to expand as well. And he's also very passionate about mental health and disability issues. So look, no doubt the farming sector will be keeping a close eye on how Eddie Punch gets on when the elections take place in June. And definitely he'll be a strong candidate in the field as far as farmers are concerned anyway.
Absolutely, Aisling, for sure. And staying with agri-politics, the IFA's campaign of engaging with county councils has continued this week as well.
Yeah, so it's the next phase of the Enough is Enough campaign. I suppose also focusing on June's local elections. They're targeting these county council meetings across the country. So in your own county of Clare, Charles, IFA members made a presentation to county councillors there to highlight the issues in the agriculture sector. Tipperary North and Tipperary South IFA also came together in Clonmel to protest outside Tipperary County Council offices. IFA members in Waterford also held a demonstration. We had around 20 farmers and several tractors gathering outside the Kerry County Council offices in Tralee, and councillors in Kerry unanimously backed an emergency motion offering their support to farmers and the IFA's Enough is Enough campaign. In Wexford, IFA members held a protest outside Wexford County Council offices before they made a presentation as well to councillors. And we also got news that IFA in Wexford and Wexford County Council have actually reached an agreement on a protocol for farm inspections in the county as well. And there's hopes that that protocol could be rolled out in other counties as well. And up to 50 farmers who are members of Cavan IFA gathered at Cavan Courthouse ahead of the county council meeting in that county. And IFA Ulster North Leinster Regional Chair Frank Brady and Cavan IFA Chair Maurice Brady addressed the local authority in the council chamber before councillors unanimously passed a resolution supporting the campaign, similar to what happened in Kerry. Now, Frank Brady, the IFA Regional Chair, spoke to Agriland about the frustrations that farmers are feeling out there on the ground. And he pointed to one of the concerns that's currently out there about proposed changes to the movement of slurry from farms. Have a listen to this.
Let's stand back now and no more regulations. We have this 4-day ruling coming in about slurry. That's crazy. Like, we're going to be filling in farms every time a load of slurry leaves my yard. It can't be done. It's going to cost more money. And it's all money, money, money. And then they wonder why farmers are getting out.
Yeah, and Frank Brady mentioned there, Aisling, about slurry, and it's important to point out as well this week that the 2024 nitrates derogation application system and the ICBF portal for dairy farmers to indicate their nitrates dairy banding is now open for declarations. And the latter one of those includes the option for a dairy farmer to feed a lower level of crude protein to their herd and achieve a reduced N excretion rate. And so that's included on the ICBF portal as well. But moving on to national politics now, Aisling, and it's that time of the year where Irish government ministers travel far and wide to far-flung corners of the world promoting all things Irish. But this year, Aisling, they come bearing gifts.
Yes, Charles, so that's correct. It's not just the traditional bowl of shamrock that's being brought to the White House this year, because several government ministers are going to be taking Irish wool products with them, including blankets and scarves, as part of their visits to locations around the world. It's part of an international campaign by the Irish Grown Wool Council. And that council, of course, was formed in April of last year to, I suppose, increase the value of wool out there. And this is a perfect opportunity to showcase Irish woolen products and how useful they can be. So ministers who will be bringing these products with them include Minister for Agriculture Charlie McConlogue, who's currently visiting Kenya, Ethiopia and South Sudan, Minister of State at the Department of Agriculture Pippa Hackett, who is on a visit to Finland, Estonia and Latvia, and their colleague in the Department of Agriculture, Minister of State Martin Hayden, who is visiting Germany as part of the St. Patrick's Day celebrations. Minister of State for Nature, Heritage and Electoral Reform, Malcolm Noonan, will be bringing woolen products to Poland and Romania. We have a nice picture of him wearing some of those garments on Agriland, if you want to check that out. Minister for the Environment, Eamon Ryan, is over in Brazil as well, as part of the government's efforts to promote Ireland on the international stage to coincide with our national festival as well. So look, it's a great platform to promote Irish wool. And I understand as well that to coincide with Cheltenham, I think that Ruby Walsh might be wearing a scarf or something of that ilk as well to promote Irish wool. And Michael D. Higgins is also going to be presenting products to dignitaries that are going to be visiting Ireland. So it's really putting wool to the forefront this week as part of the St. Patrick's Day celebrations.
Unfortunately, that brings us to the end of this week's show. Please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love it if you could spare some time to give us 5 stars and share The Farming Week with anyone you think might be interested. From Aisling and myself, have a great St. Patrick's Day.